I think that's, in the end, to me, the deeper problem for the Labour Party. It looked like a party that doesn't care much about the big issues and has these in-house arguments about who is better on telly.
Yesterday, Labour's National Executive Committee voted to block Andy Burnham from standing in the Gorton and Denton by-election, effectively stopping any near-term return to Westminster. The 9-member panel voted 8-1 against allowing Burnham to step down as the Manchester mayor to run for the seat. Starmer this morning said that Burnham is doing a great job as the Manchester mayor, but allowing him to run for Westminster would divert our resources from Labour campaigns in May elections. On the one hand, I suppose you can see that Burnham is more likely to re-win the Manchester mayoralty than anybody else is, but this still looks like self-protection, doesn't it?
Well, I think so, but he almost, and I sort of agreed, for once with Harriet Harman. I think she came out this morning and said Andy Burnham, he would have known that the NEC or the National Executive Committee would have knocked him back. It's almost like he's going through the motions. He knew what the outcome would be. He knew that he'd throw his hat into the ring and he'd get blocked and say, oh, well, look, this is outrageous. It's a bit more game playing, I think, by him. There's a lot of egos involved. But I guess, if anything, it's looked like it's just further undermined Keir Starmer's leadership. Maybe that was the intent all along. I guess from a position of strength, he should have said to Andy Burnham, yeah, you contest it and see how you go kind of thing. But because he hasn't done that, and it wasn't in the party rules for him to do that, I guess they could have overruled the party rules, I guess. But yeah, it's just further undermined his leadership.
Well, look, the Scotland Secretary of the Douglas Alexander told Times Radio the intention was to prevent more political psychodrama.
Yesterday, the officers of the National Executive Committee had to weigh quite a difficult set of judgments, looking at the Labour Party rules, where there's a presumption against sitting mayors standing in a parliamentary by-election, whether it was right to cause what would be an otherwise unnecessary mayoral contest equivalent to 20 parliamentary by-elections or more in Manchester, and the risk that that contest would absorb time, energy and money. My sense is the Prime Minister may speak on this himself today, but the judgment was more about focus than factionalism.
Let's bring in now the Times columnist Trevor Phillips, who's been writing about this in the paper today. Hello, Trevor.
Good morning, Hugo. Can I just make a quick point about Minneapolis, please?
By all means.
I think I've told you before, half my family lives in the United States, and I would just simply say African Americans are saying about this whole business with ICE, welcome to our world. This has been the experience of African Americans for the whole of my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a point absolutely worth making, Trevor. Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Manchester. You've written about this, Andy Burnham, in the paper today. You describe this decision as putting party before country. Is that how we should see it, as a fully defensive move by the NEC, which is of course dominated by Keir Starmer and his allies?
Yes, as many people have been saying, there's no wrong or right here. There is a choice. And the choice depends on what you think is most important. And what's clearly been decided here is that what is most important is to make sure that there is no threat to Keir Starmer's leadership. And that, in turn, as I think Patrick Maguire said earlier on, and we've just heard, says that in the mind of the Prime Minister, the most important thing at the moment is for him to maintain his leadership of the Labour Party, not, if you like, the issues that are more widely important to the country. So I think that the problem here is not so much whether you like Andy Burnham or you like Keir Starmer or whatever it is. It is a matter of the problem here is what it reveals about the Labour leadership's priorities. And at the moment, it looks like what they're prioritising is party discipline over as do we get the best people at the top of the government.
Trevor, 60% of Manchester voters supported Burnham as mayor, although in your column you suggest pretty heavily that if he wasn't the mayoral candidate, they would be likely to lose the mayoralty to Reform. That makes me think I understand Manchester even less than I thought I did.
Well, it's very interesting. If you, I took that from the latest poll, which has been conducted by the pollsters More in Common, and they use this MRP method, which allows you to predict the result in individual constituencies. There are 27 parliamentary constituencies within the mayoralty. According to their forecasts, 22 of those 27 would fall to Reform if there were an election this week. So I think it's a pretty reasonable supposition that were there to be a mayoral election, then you'd really have to put your money, without Burnham, by the way, as a candidate, you'd have to put your money on Reform winning. And even if it were not Reform, people in Manchester tell me that the real danger for Labour are the Greens. And actually that, in my mind, makes it even more likely that there will be a Labour defeat, because what would happen, nobody's going to vote for the Conservatives right now in Manchester. All the right-wing votes will go to Reform. But what will happen is, if there is a strong Green challenge, and if, for example, George Galloway put his hat into the ring, you could see the votes to the centre and the left being split, and in the end, Reform coming through to win.
Is there an argument?
And I suspect, by the way, that was the thing that weighed most heavily amongst the Labour panel yesterday.
Well, is there an argument as well that Andy Burnham, this has sort of worked out pretty well for him, because he gets to look like he's been hard done by. It's very possible if he had run in this by-election, he wouldn't have won it, and then they might have lost the mayoralty and he'd have been a joke.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, the first thing you said is absolutely correct, because from Andy Burnham's point of view, he's now the injured party. He has now been erected as the person that everybody fears most, and that makes him look incredibly powerful. So actually, from his point of view, I know Harriet has said he would have known in advance. Of course he would have known in advance, but that's not the reason. That's not the point. The point is, tactically, putting his name out there on Saturday night ends up with a win-win for him. They could have said yes, in which case he would almost certainly have gone on to win the selection and win the constituency. They said no. He is now the prince over the water, the man that is so charismatic, so important, so significant. They have to use what the Soviets used to call administrative means to keep him out. And that means at any point he decides to come in, there's another opportunity, as there will be, for him to take a seat. He becomes the man.
Yeah. Look, Trevor, finally, you're a Labour Party watcher of long standing. How does this compare with past leaderships, Blair and Brown and so on? Were they equally controlling? Did they indulge in equal machinations?
Well, I think there are two things to say about that. Blair and Brown, of course, were accused of control freakery. But the difference is that their control freakery was from a position of strength. They basically just slapped everybody aside, and because they were in charge and they knew they were in charge and they could get on with the things they wanted to do. The problem here is that this control freakery looks like somebody cowering in the corner, locking the door because they know that there's a big bad wolf outside who's stronger than them, and the only thing they can do is keep the big bad wolf out. The other thing I would say, and I think this is a deeper point, the arguments that took place around Blair and Brown were about something. They were about, for example, privatisation, how we should run public services, and so on. The problem with this, I think, for the Labour Party, is that it looks just like, an argument about who's got longer eyelashes. And the country doesn't want to hear that. The country wants to hear, what are you going to do about social care? What are you going to do about the economy? What are you going to do about the threat of China? And there doesn't seem to be any actual argument between Starmer and Andy Burnham about those big issues. And I think that's, in the end, to me, the deeper problem for the Labour Party. It looked like a party that doesn't care much about the big issues and has these in-house arguments about who's better on telly.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That is our Times columnist Trevor Phillips. You can read Trevor's piece in the paper, of course.